Weekly signals all remain bearish. The bulls would have to turn that around. If they turn back to bullish, they got to stay that way. If they go from bearish to bullish, back to bullish to bearish, back to bullish, right back to bearish, it just shows we're going sideways. Now, weekly signals are all bearish. My guess is we're going to try to get back above the 20-week moving average and rally up towards this cloud area right here, and again towards the trend line, and then turn down. If we lose the 50-week, we can't get a bigger rally, then that would be extremely bearish. And like I said, again, if we're bouncing off support, we can go higher. But if we lose this level of support, then look out below. Signals here, bearish. Weekly signals here, bearish. Again, it's going flatline, but it's red, again, showing this trading range. Right now, the signal's still bearish as we've gotten rejection off the 69,000 area here, which is the peak over here. We've gotten rejection 8 times off of 69,000. Critical mass is starting to drop now. We've been going again sideways. We've seen the rainbow cloud go from bullish to bullish, now bearish. If we rally back up, the rainbow cloud will likely act as resistance. Critical mass is dropping, and again, we are now have, as the sell signal was triggered, dropping below critical mass and it turned red, we've seen the balance of power go negative here in the weekly time frame. Weekly signals are all bearish. Even if we rally back up, we'd have to see oscillators go back into the positive region. Right now, they're negative. They've turned negative into the weekly time frame. Signals remain bearish for Bitcoin in the weekly time frame. Even if they turn back to bullish, then we're still just going sideways. They would have to turn bullish, remain that way, and get all these breakouts. It's a problem. Again, oscillators are still in the negative region for Bitcoin. Signals are still bearish. Rally back up and test the upper boundary of the cloud. You got to clear these levels if you're going to flip these weekly signals back to bullish. Right now, they're all bearish. If we get back above the 20-week moving average, you got to stay above it, drop back below it again in an overall topping process. The Moonboy oscillator trying to turn back up with this rally that we've had. Again, I think we get a bigger pullback, but then I think we go higher. And again, maybe we'll see Bitcoin peak at extremes up here with the Moonboy oscillator, but it's trying to turn back up. I told you that the chart was still in a bearish arrangement. It still has the 50 still below the 200, but we got above that 200, halted at the 400 period moving average. But as we've had the rally, now look what's happening. You're getting pring parameter into positive territory. So again, I think we're pulling back here to the 15 cloud, maybe a little bit lower, maybe to the trend line right here, excluding the shadows as I've talked about. And then I think we're going to attempt to break the downward trend line right here. Probably go back up and test 68, 69,000. That is, unless my signals, which are correct, all begin to turn back to bearish when we take out this low. But again, this is a sign that I'm probably going to be correct in that we're seeing pring parameter go positive. Again, I think we'll eventually get that 50 back above the 200. The green line is the 50, the black line is the 200. So again, I think we're pulling back. I think we'll get a higher low, and then I think we'll get a big Fed pivot rally. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the chart, if you like the indicators, let me know that by supporting the channel today. Follow the link. It'll take you to a secured site. You can donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. If you do that, I thank you. But I do need to hear from you in order to make it work. If you like the indicators, if you like the charts, let me know that by supporting the channel. I don't have any sponsors, just a direct relationship with you. The money made on YouTube is through sponsors. I don't want to do that. I don't want to sell you a bunch of junk, send you to crypto exchanges that want to get you all leveraged up so they can wipe you out. A lot of that goes on. I don't want any part of it. Please support the channel today. At the trend line of resistance that I'm showing you, you'll see more of it in this video, turning down off of the trend line right here. We got another topping signal for the short-term momentum, bottoming signal back over here at the bottom. But I do think we bottomed out because we did get this bullish buy signal, and we're now seeing momentum turn positive. So I think we're just pulling back. And again, the levels in this video where I think we're pulling back, but then I think we're coming back up in here. We're seeing signals try to turn back to bullish, at the cloud back to bullish. We're seeing the ribbon back to bullish. We're seeing the background turn back to bullish, and other indicators are turning back to bullish. I've said and continue to say I believe Bitcoin's in a bottoming process. I think it'll pull back, but then I think we're going to come up here, and then I think it's going to top out, and then I think Bitcoin's going to crash. The weekly signals can all begin to turn back to bullish, remain that way, and we get above 69,000 and stay that way. Okay, now Bitcoin just closed out the week here on Sunday. We've just now started Monday session. I told you Bitcoin is likely going to pull back. It's at resistance levels. Right here, it's at the 10-week moving average. For the week, Bitcoin, it had a rally after dropping 19.31% from this lower high that set up, trying to get above the 20-week moving average. It ended up rebounding up by 7.77%. 777 jackpot. Bitcoin, again, in the prior two and a half weeks, dropped over 19%. And again, I told you I thought it would rebound, but I do think there's a good chance that it goes up and tries to take out this high and comes back up and hits the trend line over here. And again, goes towards 68 or 69,000. Again, I believe Bitcoin has topped back over here. It'll form a larger divergence with the S&P 500. I think Bitcoin will pull back and then rally before the week ends. We get a Fed pivot rally. The Fed is about to cut rates. It's probably going to be 0.5%. And I think that the market will rally on that. I think NASDAQ has already peaked. It will rally to go get a lower high. I think the S&P will make a new high and diverge with Bitcoin in the topping process. Buddy expects it's going to cut rates, and now Bitcoin's going to really go. What has to happen in order for Bitcoin to really go? It's got to be able to get above 69,000, never drop back below it again, which is this level right here. You got to be able to clear these peaks. We've had 8 failed attempts to get above 69,000. You got to move to a new high. You got to break the downward trend line. You got to flip the weekly charts all back to bullish. The bulls have been unable to do that. Right now we're below the 20-week moving average. That's bearish. Even if we get above it, you got to be able to have staying power. You got to be able to stay above it. Here we tried to get above it with the Bitcoin conference. Down over here, Bitcoin was bottoming and we were going towards 70,000. We hit it right on the nose and we reversed. And in 2 weeks, we saw 29% drop on Bitcoin back to our 50-week moving average, where I told you it was bottoming to attempt a rebound. I told you to watch the Fibonacci's. It went right up to the 78.6 Fibonacci. So again, now I'm telling you, Bitcoin is likely in a bottoming process, just as I told you over here, just as I told you over here, as I told you back at the May low. Bullish signals at all of those lows. A second that we bottomed, we got that bullish signal on July 5th. I told you we were in a bottoming process. Here I told you we were hitting the 50-week moving average, Bitcoin's average price, key support levels, the lower boundary of the channel that we would likely bounce. Again, we'll probably pull back, but again, probably see a Fed rally, Fed pivot rally, and Bitcoin will probably rally into early to mid-October, maybe late September, possibly, but again, I think it'll rally up towards 68, 69,000, and then it'll turn unless, great Scott, did you hear what I said? Unless support breaks and we start taking the slow out. And if you do that, that's extremely bearish for Bitcoin. You're taking out the 50-week moving average. You're taking out Bitcoin's average price. You do that, you go down to lower levels. If we can bounce at support, then you can again attempt to rebound. For the week, Bitcoin was up 7.77%, stalling at the 10-period moving average, stalling at some resistance levels. I'll show you the downward trend line, the overhead resistance, and draw that very straight. You'll see it on the daily chart in a second. But we're stalling at the 10-period. Probably will pull back on Tuesday, rally Wednesday with the Fed in all likelihood. Probably rally into late September or on into early to mid-October, where I think Bitcoin will complete the top. Again, I do believe Bitcoin has already topped, but it's in a topping process, diverging with the S&P 500. I think it'll likely come up here and get one more lower high in all likelihood. Bitcoin for the Saturday session began to turn down. It ended up dropping 0.88%. For the Sunday session, it dropped nearly 1.5%, 1.47%, dropping back below the 50-period moving average. That's the green line you see right here. I told you that still below the 20, 10 and 20 still below the 50, and that we'd likely see a pullback. Now we're seeing the 10 turn up to try to get back above the 20 here as we start the Monday session. So again, likely going to pull back and then try to break this downward trend line. Right here is the trend line I'm talking about. From our rally up to 70,000 to this trend line right here, we turned down, we rally back up, we got this peak right here, and if you join those two levels here, excluding the shadow, we came right up and we slammed right into that level just above our 50, dropped right back below it. So again, I think you're going to bottom in here. I think you're going to pull back here, probably drop below the 10 period and then bottom out somewhere, maybe at this trend line, a little higher, just under the 10. But then I think you're going to break this level and you're going to come back towards this trend line here, towards 68 or 69,000 in all likelihood. You're probably going to see a post, or probably going to see a Fed pivot rally. The moving averages, as I've said, are still in a bearish arrangement. So again, you're likely going to get a pullback and then a breakout of this trend line. Now, we're turning off of this trend line. We're turning off the 50-period moving average. We're also turning off of this horizontal resistance area right here, this resistance zone, which we came right up to the lower end of this. Again, it was support over here, support over here, support over here. That became resistance over here, and now resistance right here. So we're stalling at this trend line and at this horizontal resistance level turning down. So again, I think you're going to pull back. Talked about bouncing. We already saw that we bounced off the 50-week moving average. Here's Bitcoin's average price. We bounced off that. And here's this lower boundary of the channel. Look at that. We bounced right off that level here, parallel to this upper boundary. So again, I think you're probably going to pull back in the next 2 trading sessions, probably get a pretty big pullback, and then I think you're going to rally up the Fed pivot. I think they'll go 0.5% and give the market what they want, give the market what it wants. The cuts that began, the first rate cut in 2001 was 0.5%. First rate cut in 2007, which led to the bear markets, was also 0.5%. I think that the markets that will fuel a rally with Bitcoin, I think it will fuel a rally with market. I think the stock market will move, the S&P will move to new high, diverge with Bitcoin, and then top out. I think NASDAQ doing the same thing Bitcoin is. I think it will get another lower high here in this kind of counter trend move right here. So again, I do think we're going to move above this level, and then I'll be watching this high over here and the highs over here. And again, the resistance zone. When we had the resistance zone here, I talked about the double top that we turned off of that level. And then over here, we talked about this trend line and rallying up to 70,000. And so I'm looking at this level very closely, around 68 or 69,000 if we overthrow it a little bit, and this peak over here at 70,000. Bitcoin bouncing off support levels. So again, I'm going to say it again. Listen carefully. I believe Bitcoin is in a bottoming process. It's going to pull back more, but then I think it's going to go up here, complete a larger topping process. Don't get the two confused. One's a short-term bottom that, again, I told you it can be bottoming here, or I can test this low, but it looks like now, again, we'll probably pull back and then probably try to break this downward trend line right here. And these trend lines have been absolutely amazing. Let me just bring these trend lines up. Again, when they break, reversals tend to happen up and down. Here we broke this downward trend line right here, but we came up to this one right here. And again, it's likely we're going to pull back to this one right here. I've excluded the shadow there. If I include it, maybe just a little bit lower. But these trend lines have been absolutely incredible. Bitcoin has been hitting these trend lines up and down over and over again, and it's been marking turning points for Bitcoin. It's pretty amazing. So I've been watching these trend lines. So we broke this one, so we're now reversing off of this one right here, and that's probably going to take us back to this one, excluding the shadow or including the shadow, probably a bigger pullback, maybe to the right there or so, or down into here in the next 2 sessions. And then I think you're going to go higher and break out above this trend line. And I think that'll probably take you into late September or early October, early to mid-October, where I think Bitcoin will peak in here near this trend line right here once again, or maybe overthrow it a little bit and then peak, test 69,000. We'll see how it goes. But again, these trend lines are absolutely incredible, absolutely incredible. Like in the weekly chart, Bitcoin's bouncing off its average price right here. It's turning off the 50-day moving average right here, just as we're turning off that 10-week moving average in the weekly time frame. We didn't quite get above it here. We did slightly move above the 50-period moving average. So I expect a bigger fall back towards this trend line, including the shadow, excluding it. I think that we'll break this trend line right here, and then I think Bitcoin will complete the topping process. We've been going, we peaked over 6 months ago, and we've been in this chop. We've been in this, channel, which is being called a bull flag, and could be a problem. You got a recession coming. Recession is 3 to 6 months away based on the uninverting of the yield curve, based on the Psalm rule being triggered with the unemployment rate. The 3-month moving average is warning we're about to get a recession, so we know it's very close. Market will begin to price that in. Bitcoin will not escape. It will price in a recession. That's the problem. All these models telling us, oh, the cycle is that Bitcoin's going to rally up to 180 to 200,000. Now these guys, when Bitcoin starts going lower, they start jacking up the target levels. Now it's going to be 350, 400,000, 500,000. What they do every time Bitcoin drops, which they told us wasn't going to happen, then they start jacking up these target levels to unrealistic, out of touch with reality levels. Bitcoin will eventually go to 100,000 in my opinion, but I don't think it will happen until after the recession. I don't think the bear market ever ended. We're in a very large, it's called an expanded flat, where you have a sell-off. We dropped 78%. We rebounded back up. Now we're getting another big sell. We'll get another big sell-off. If the market is peaking, which again, S&P is going to go higher, I think NASDAQ's already peaked. It's going to go back and fill the gap. And if it does end up peaking and completing the topping process, then again, if the market goes down, so is Bitcoin. It's the problem. And you got the dollar bottoming out, broken out, it's back tested. These recession signals triggering, Bitcoin's going to be safe haven. Remember, that's what they told us about the inflation. The market, it's going to go lower. Everybody's concerned about inflation, but everybody's going to, pile into Bitcoin. Bitcoin went down with the market. It wasn't a inflation hedge. I'm just telling you, look, you've got bearish moving averages. You've had the death cross. You've dropped back below the 100. Personally, I believe you're going to come back up here and get back above these levels, but I think it's going to be short-lived. After the next pullback here, we get a Fed pivot rally. The Fed pivot means the Fed starts lowering rates. Just a bunch of FUD. I told you, I've been talking to you about these tops over here at 72, 73,000, over here at their double top, over here, told you we were going to rally to 70,000 and turn, hit it right on the nose, talk to you about the counter trend for the Fibonacci retracements. And now I'm talking about, possibly going up here if support can hold. Talked about coming down to the trend line right here most recently. I've talked about these bottoms. I've talked about these tops. Really don't care which way Bitcoin goes. If it goes up, all my signals turn back to bullish. We somehow managed to dodge a recession. Great. Really don't care. Bearish signals remain. We get a recession and Bitcoin collapses. Great. I really don't care. I can make money either way. I really don't care which way Bitcoin goes. I'm telling you, we've been told for over 6 months now, here we go. Not. Here we go. Not. Here we go. 100,000. Not. Here we go, 100,000, not. Here we go, 100,000, not. And we're probably going to get one more attempt to test 69,000, 68, 69,000 or so. But again, the very people that are telling us that we're going to be at 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, whatever, these are the same people that told us this wasn't going to happen. And this is called distribution. The rallies are being sold on Bitcoin. Now, you can ignore that. I told you what has to happen for Bitcoin to break out. We got to break this level. You got to somehow manage to dodge a recession. The dollar has to collapse. You got to be able to clear 69,000, never drop back below it again, make a new high, never come back to this level, and continue going for the rest of the bull market, the duration of the bull market. Bulls have been unsuccessful in doing that. So again, Bitcoin consistently holds below the 20-week moving average and the 100-day moving average. That's that pink line right here. Then Bitcoin, the bears are in control. Now, do I believe we're going to get back above those levels? Probably. I have the guts to tell you exactly what I think. Now, could I be wrong? Yeah. If support breaks, if we break these support, Bitcoin's average price, we start breaking down right here, we start selling off, taking out this low and taking out the 50-week moving average, coin's in some serious trouble. Key support levels will be breaking. So again, I expect a bigger pullback. As we start the Monday session, it's already happening as well. We're seeing more selling as we did over the weekend. And then I think this trend line will break. And then I think we're going to rally up to this trend line right here. So that's what I think is going on. Watch these trend lines. Again, whether including the shadow or excluding the shadow, maybe excluding the shadow here. That's where I think we're headed. We'll be back below the 10-period moving average as it's crossing above the 20, not seen on this chart as we saw on the other chart, and then I think we break that trend line and go back up to this longer-term trend line here. We've had a divergence. This low was slightly lower on a closing basis, just slightly lower than this low over here. So we do have a divergence in place on the RSI. We'll probably confirm a higher low. If we get a divergence, then again, we might come back and try to close down into this trend line or just beyond this level. But again, I think you've got a good shot at a higher low right here that we sell off the 2 days before the Fed pivot, and then we get a massive rally that breaks the trend line in all likelihood. You've got the same divergence here on the MACD, but the MACD is still in negative territory. So again, I think you pull back here, and then I think you get your breakout. So I think you'll build momentum, or again, like I said, the trend line, including the shadow, would take us back to Bitcoin's average price right here, maybe this lower trend line right here. We'll see what happens. Do that again, you'll have a multiple point divergence on a closing basis. Again, the RSI doesn't look at these shadows, so keep that in mind. But again, that's what I think is going to happen. I think we pull back, and then I think we get a big Bitcoin Fed pivot rally. I think the Fed cuts by 0.5%. The markets celebrate. Bitcoin in the market tops out probably early October or mid-October. Bitcoin might, and I say late September because Bitcoin might peak out before the market does. Times that is the case. Another thing too is we are going sideways. The moving averages are crisscrossing back and forth, but we now have a death cross with the 50 crossing below the 200. The next rally, that's likely not going to change, but we'll probably get back above the 200 period moving average. The moon boys will declare, here we go again, and again we will likely see a peak. That's assuming we can break the trend line. My guess is that we will. Moving averages are still bearish. You still have the 10 and 20 below the 50. That's probably going to change with the next rally. They keep crisscrossing back and forth as we've been going in this sideways move, gradually drifting lower. We've dropped now 33% from the high to the low over time. A series of lower highs and lower lows, and they're going to proclaim, oh, it's a higher low, here's a higher high, it's over. And Bitcoin, if that happens, which I think it will, Bitcoin will likely peak around 68, 69,000 or so, and then turn. So again, in order to turn things around, you got to flip everything back to bullish. You got to get above the 100, stay above it. You got to get the 50 back above the 200. That's a green line back above the 200. And again, all of this is bearish. Moving averages are pointing down. The 10's now coming back up as we've had this rally off of the lows, trying to get back above the 20. But again, they're both still below the 50, and that's why I told you we'd likely get a pullback, is because there was still a bearish arrangement until today. Starting the Monday session, the 10 was still below the 20-period moving average all last week. On NASDAQ and Bitcoin are doing the same thing. NASDAQ's had this rally up off of the lows. I told you previous week when we had that sell-off right here, I was looking for a bottom with the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. We got it with the bullish inside day. It was confirmed with the CPI data. We've had this rally. We're likely going to pull back, just like Bitcoin with the stock market, but then we're going to get a CPI rally, a Fed pivot rally. I think NASDAQ already peaked, as I've talked about at great length and detail, and I think NASDAQ comes up here to 20,398 or the 20,400 area, again, in early to mid-October, and I think it peaks along with Bitcoin. Maybe Bitcoin peaks with it, or just a little bit sooner. That's why I'm saying it could happen by late September with Bitcoin. Then I think you complete the double top here on the NASDAQ. I think it will follow Bitcoin with the 50 continuing to drop, and coming back down and taking out the 200 period, which we already have with Bitcoin, and getting the death cross. So again, while I think Bitcoin's going to pull back, I also think it's going to rally up, and I think NASDAQ's going to rally up. So if you're hearing me say Bitcoin's about to crash right now, you're not listening to what I'm saying. Bitcoin is going to pull back and probably go up to 68 or 69,000 unless key support levels are taken out. I don't think they will be, and I think Bitcoin will complete a divergence with the S&P 500. In the lower window, I have the S&P 500. I think it's going to go make a new high. I think Bitcoin will come back up here and get another lower high and diverge with the S&P 500. And again, you already have a divergence with these other peaks right here. I think we'll end up getting another one, and it will have the S&P look something like this peak right here. Already are divergences. I just don't think it's done yet. And that's why I think Bitcoin's going to rally up probably one more time. Now, over here, the final rally was very feeble. So if I'm wrong about that, start breaking key support, let you know, and that would be very bearish. But right now, we're bouncing off key support levels. I think Bitcoin can get a larger rally back up, but I don't think it's going to move to a new high. Bitcoin and the S&P have diverged over and over at turning points. This is a 2021 top, and all these other tops over here, 2020, and the new bull market cycle back in 2017, back in 2018, and over again. Bitcoin and the S&P, they tend to diverge from one another at major topping points. People keep telling me, well, my favorite moon boy is saying that when we break out of the bull flag, my favorite moon boys keep saying that too. Just your favorite moon boy, it's mine too. One of my favorites keeps saying it every single day. The problem is again, if you look at the Bitcoin weekly chart right here, Bitcoin has formed bull flags at other major tops. And I remember back over here, when we were being told we were going to go to 100,000 and Bitcoin dropped down dramatically, people that told us, that was never going to happen. We're never dropping below 60,000 again. That's what they told us. We had that drop, and then they told us, it's a bull flag. It's a bull flag. Well, we ended up forming a bear flag. We rose back up after dropping 52%, formed a bear flag at the 200-day moving average in the daily time frame. And then we saw the bottom fall out of Bitcoin, and we had a bull flag there. It couldn't produce a reversal, and these other peaks have marked bull flags. And I don't want to miss the bull flag pattern. As I talked about, this was a bull flag right here, and that gave us a new high. We've had other bull flag patterns that I talked about over here, and again over here that were very nice continuation patterns. It doesn't dismiss that we had bull flag patterns set up at each of these major tops, and again, the bull flag pattern ended up failing. So my guess is we're going to try to rally back up to the upper boundary, and then I think we're going to see the bottom fall out of Bitcoin. If we can't rally up to the upper boundary, we start breaking the 50-week moving average, Bitcoin's average price, that lower boundary of the channel, then all bets are off. Support breaks. But my guess is you're going to get a Fed pivot rally. I wouldn't ignore this because, again, these patterns have been present at other major tops. It still didn't stop Bitcoin from collapsing. Now, Bitcoin hit the lower boundary of the channel here in this trend line and the Bitcoin's average price and the 50-week moving average, and we bounced. Right now, as I'm making the video, Bitcoin's selling off as I told you it would. Off over the weekend, I told you it'd pull back likely Monday and Tuesday further, and again, probably towards this trend line right here. And then I think we'll get a breakout. But right now, we're turning off this resistance. We're turning off the trend line of resistance. If we can clear this resistance level, I think we'll come up into this area as I've talked about. Losing all these levels of support, then all bets are off. But my guess is you're going to get a Fed pivot rally quickly. We're being told how bullish that is for the market. Began to cut rates and soared in 2020 and 2021 as, again, the Fed has an inflation problem. They can't just drop rates down to nothing. Can't start doing quantitative easing again because it'll just kick inflation right back up. Saying they won't do it eventually. The Fed needs a recession to deal with this issue of inflation. Where people are making their mistake and ignoring the fact that we're actually going to have a recession and the Fed's going to let it happen and go back to their easy money policies on steroids initially. They can start cutting. Cut is warning, hey, a recession is coming. And we have, again, recession indicators, an inversion of the yield curve that's taken place, and the Psalm rule being triggered on the unemployment rate. They're telling us that the recession is about 3 to 6 months away. Market will price that in, Bitcoin will price that in, and the Fed will begin to cut, trying to ease the pain of recession. Here in 2000, the market had already peaked with the stock market, dropped 19.5% down here when the Fed did their first cut right here, and here we had, again, a little pullback just before the cut. That's what I think is going to happen with Bitcoin. And then we rallied for 19 days, only to get a lower high and a counter trend, and it was just under 4 weeks, and then the crash resumed. Went on to drop another 31% or so. S&P 500. This is what people are ignoring. This is what happened when we got the first Fed cut. It's a bounce, but then it didn't last. This is 2001. The market had already peaked in 2007. The market ended up topping. This is what I think is going to happen with the S&P right now. We had sold off in the summer. We had started to rebound. We got a little bit of volatility right before the first rate cut here and over here, and then we kind of went sideways the 2 days before. But then we had this surge with the first rate cut, and we rallied for 17 days. The other one was 19 days. This was 17 days, about 3.5, 4 weeks or so. 3.5. The other one was almost 4 weeks. And here we dropped 20.5% following that, and we topped out, and we formed a major top on the S&P 500. This is what I think is going to happen right now. I think we're going to see the S&P move to a new all-time high, top out, diverge with Bitcoin, and then you're going to see the bottom fall out of the stock market and fall out of the bottom with Bitcoin. This is what has happened. First rate cuts had recessions, real recessions that were going to come. Didn't have a bunch of fake stimulus into it, official stimulus. It's going to be the case now. The Fed can't go back to their extreme policies right now because inflation will come roaring back, and that's what people continue to miss. So again, on the other scenario, we saw the 20% decline, nearly 20% decline, and a bounce with the Fed first Fed rate cut. Here we saw a rally into a new high, and then a sharp decline of 20%, a bounce, and again a much bigger drop with the stock market. And again, if the stock market, which has a positive correlation with Bitcoin, is dropping and pricing in recession, so will Bitcoin. That's a bunch of FUD. No, Bitcoin's not going to escape. Eventually, Bitcoin will move into a bull market. I just don't think this is it. I think it's a larger bear cycle. Quickly, I have the Fed funds rate down in the lower window. When we began to get the Fed pivot, again, the bear market showed up, and that's what's going to happen with Bitcoin. It's going to follow the market, and we saw 51% decline over here. Again, I just showed you these tops up close. Already started to drop 19.5%, rebounded briefly, and then the bottom fell out of the stock market. Same thing over here. We rallied up to a new high, for 17 days, and then the 20.5% drop, a rebound, and then the bottom fell out of the stock market, 58%. This is what happened with the Fed rate cuts and the pricing in of the recession and the stock market. Bitcoin going to do the same. A positive correlation with the market. My signals all begin to turn back to bullish. Somehow managed to dodge a recession and the dollar collapses after breaking out and now back testing. I doubt it.